Welcome to Learning Unlocked. I am your host, Brit Bingold. As an instructional specialist in Gilbert, Arizona, I am a total nerd when it comes to classroom strategies and educational pedagogy. Educators are the key holders to unlocking learning for students. Today, as always, my goal is to provide you with resources and tools, the keys, to enable and accelerate learning for all students. Thanks for joining me today. Let's get started. Before we get going on the interview today, I just wanted to do a quick reminder that if you have time to rate us and write us a review on Apple Podcasts, we would appreciate it. The more reviews and ratings we get, the more educators will see our podcast. So if you like what you're hearing and you think others would too, please head over and provide us a review. Thanks. Hey key holders, welcome to episode 17 of Learning Unlocked. Today my guest is probably one of the funniest people I know, not to mention an extremely knowledgeable educator. Jenna Quarelli-Buck is in her 26th year in education and has worked as an ELA standard specialist at the Arizona Department of Education. Now she works in Gilbert Public Schools as the secondary ELA curriculum coordinator, and we are so lucky to have her, and I am so blessed that I get to work with her. On today's episode, we are discussing literacy and why it is so crucial. That it just literally locks in learning for all students in every content area. And let's face it, it's a life skill. So here's my interview with Jenna. I hope you enjoy. Hey Jenna, I'm so glad you got to be on the podcast today. I'm so stoked and I'm so appreciative that you've done this over spring break. How's your spring break going?
You know, I was happy to join you over spring break because my spring break is not super exciting this year. My son's spring break did not line up with my spring break due to the weird starts that we've been in. And frankly, now that he's driving, he doesn't need me to really do anything anymore. So I was feeling kind of lonely. So thanks for inviting me today. I appreciate it.
It's like we're almost having a coffee conversation, only we're doing it digitally.
Yes.
How are you feeling about him driving? I don't know if I would be ready for that.
He's been driving. We started teaching him to drive when he was probably like 13, 14, when Doug and he would go hunting and they were back in the woods, on those roads. And so he got comfortable with the car and what it felt like, to push the gas and push the brake. So by the time he got to the point where he had his permit, he felt pretty comfortable already with the vehicle. Like he had a sense of the vehicle. And so he did really well. And we drove with him a lot, but we did put him through a defensive driving course. And he took 5 2-hour lessons with someone other than us telling him how to drive. And that was awesome. Yeah. And I felt really good about that. And actually the last lesson was his driving test. And so he passed it with flying colors. And then we just took that certificate into the DMV and he got his license. And, he's been so good and responsible. And, I'm knocking on my head right now. It's great. But let me tell you, having a kid that drives himself to school has been liberating.
I bet. I'm thinking to myself, I have an 8 and a 4-year-old and like half my day is commuting them places. You know what I mean? So, but I'm also like, oh my gosh, that's like coming up, like it's just going to go by so fast. Like I can't believe she's going to be 9 soon, and holy moly. All right, well, let's get started on the interview because I know we could probably talk forever about anything.
Yes.
So I want you to tell me your story of how you became an educator.
It's an interesting story, and I came to it kind of late than to some other people. My big goal when I graduated from high school in California, I was going to be an investigative reporter a la Murphy Brown. Okay, which means I just aged myself right there, right?
You did not. I know who Murphy Brown is.
Okay. So, but I did come back to Arizona to go to school, and I went to NAU, and I got my degree in journalism, and I was like, yay! I graduated with a degree in journalism, and that's not what I want to do. So I found myself, doing what a lot of people do, which is, I was waiting tables and I was working at the ski resort up in Flagstaff, and it was super fun. And I was just sort of living my best life in college and then not in college. And then I had a boyfriend that talked me into going to Alaska with him for the summer to work in the fishing industry up there.
Okay.
So I hopped in a truck with this young man and we drove to Valdez, Alaska. And this was the summer after the Valdez tanker incident happened. So the salmon market was iffy, which meant for me, I didn't have a lot of work. Like I would work crazy hours for like 3 weeks and then there would be total downtime because the market was so crazy. So during that time, I was spending a lot of time in the Valdez Public Library, which was a beautiful building, very, very small. And I was, one of the ladies saw me in there all the time and she asked, they had a group of kids coming in and they were doing like a reading program. And I sat down and she's like, hey, do you want to volunteer with some of these kids? Blah, blah, blah. And suddenly I found myself working with these like middle school kids on reading and talking about books and all this stuff. And it was an epiphany moment where I thought, this might be something that I'd be really good at. And sure enough, once I finally made it home from Alaska in one piece, I went back to NAU and I got my post-bac certification in secondary English and simultaneously finished up my master's in rhetoric and composition. And that's how I got into it. And it started, though, with me going to Poland for 6 months and teaching English in Poland and then coming back. And then that's when I got my job down in Tucson at Mountain View High in the Miranda district. And I loved it, man. It was one of those weird things, but I loved being in the classroom.
Oh my gosh. I love that you went and had to go from Alaska to Poland to Tucson.
Yes, to go to Tucson.
To go to Tucson. No offense, Tucson people, but Alaska and Poland, you're like adventure. And then all of a sudden we're in Tucson. But I love that. And, I think every educator has a story of why they ended up where they were. Very rarely, I think, do teachers know right from the start what they're going to do, what they're going to teach. So I would love to know kind of why you ended up where you ended up.
Right, because I loved English, right? It was one of my favorite subjects in school, and I loved reading and writing, obviously, with a journalism degree. Yeah. But I never thought about teaching it or talking about it with younger people. And once that happened, I was like, wow, this might be something I'd be good at. And yeah, I never looked back after that.
When you see light bulbs go off in their heads, and it really is just like an endorphin rush. Mm-hmm. And people don't realize it. Like teaching is an everyday endorphin rush when you get kids looking at you for knowledge or just for kindness or for whatever reason, and you see that spark in them.
Yep.
It's just like nothing fills my cup more than that. So I think that's why teachers stay in the profession. Okay, so but now you are our ELA curriculum coordinator.
Yes, I am.
And I am so glad I get to work with you, and I can't wait to work with you more. But really what we want to talk about today is literacy. And we did a lot of alliteration here because, I'm a former English teacher, and as are you. And so we had to do some alliteration. So our title, Literacy Literally Locks in Learning. But I think that's so true. And I want to dig in deeper with that today. So the first question I want to ask you is, basically, let's define literacy for the audience, mainly because I think it's being seen, or it was seen, as just the ability to read and write. And today it has advanced into much more. So can you give me your definition of literacy?
Well, you are absolutely right. Literacy today is so much more than just reading and writing. The literacy that we're discussing nowadays goes well beyond that, being able to recognize just letters and sounds and make out words on a page. I just don't think that there is a simple definition of literacy anymore. The world has changed too much. Literacy now means that people have to be able to understand and be familiar with a wide breadth of background knowledge. And they have to be able to use a variety of deep thinking skills to interpret meaning and understand the purpose of a huge variety of texts that are used in crazy different contexts. The reality is that sophisticated literacy is hard. It is really difficult. It takes work and it takes effort. And people need to be aware of the context that surrounds the text or the messages that they're consuming, or at least the event or the idea that made the author or the writer of that text attempt it in the first place. And so when we're teaching kids about literacy, we need to not only teach them how to research the writer of the text to better understand the viewpoints and the positions of a person that might support that text, but be able to figure out why or who the primary audience of the text might be, and the choices that an author might use as information to hook into that particular audience rather than another one. And I think the hardest part now about literacy is being able to look inside yourself and recognize your own biases and recognize when you are interpreting information the way that you want to interpret it, maybe not the way that it was intended. People have to be willing to dive deep, and we have to do more reading and research and really to understand the bigger picture and to be able to enter into a variety of conversations about important topics. And it isn't enough to just share your opinion anymore. I mean, opinions have to have some sort of credibility in order to be taken seriously by literate people. And I think we've lost a little bit of that, and we need to bring that back on track. That just having an opinion isn't enough. If you're going to have a literate opinion, you need to know stuff.
Yeah. I mean, wow. Well, when you said the reality is that sophisticated literacy is hard, I mean, you're not joking. I mean, because we not only have to prepare students to do these things in school, right?
Right.
Be aware of author's purpose, be aware of author's rhetoric, understand the audience, understand the point of view, but they need to be able to understand how to transfer that then into their lives. So when they are presented with something, they can look at it objectively. I know you said to look beyond their own biases and recognize, whether this is credible or reasonable evidence. And I think we have seen that people really believe opinions are fact, and that can be a really scary place to live for sure. So, I think you're absolutely right. Literacy is now not just, hey, words and sounds and you can read. And I mean, it is all those things, but it goes so much, like you said, deeper. And that's why I just think it was crucial we have this conversation today. Because it can't just be an ELA, right? I mean, It needs to branch out and be in everything so that we are creating a culture of students that just can exit high school or college, or wherever they're exiting and get into a world and be able to have, be a literate person, but also be able to filter out the crap, right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay. That was amazing. Yeah, it is hard. So even though I feel like we've made some progress in this area. Like there
a little bit.
Yeah, a little. I love how you say a little bit.
We've made a little bit of progress.
We've made some progress. Yeah. Those overarching words. But I feel like most teachers, and I'm just going to say it, they hear the word literacy and they're like, that's the ELA teacher's area. Yep. I don't have to teach that.
That's right, exactly what they say.
Okay. I'm like, fact or fiction? What do you think?
Yes. There's no doubt about that.
I know. And it's hard because sometimes I think it's more about insecurities, right? Like I don't know what I don't know about teaching literacy in science or teaching literacy in math. So I don't want to touch that because I just don't want to. I kind of know my wheelhouse and I'm happy there, right? So, but we've seen, and as you explained before, it is so crucial for kids because it's a life skill. So what do you think how can school leadership debunk this idea? Like, how can principals and assistant principals kind of debunk this idea that other content areas really need to embrace literacy and why it is so important that they do?
And it's a good question, because it's going to have to come from there. You got to sort of create this culture on your campus, and it's really important that our school leaders, who many of whom, most of whom, almost all of whom were at one time classroom teachers themselves.
Right.
And so sometimes when they come to this, they're bringing their own classroom experiences to this problem. The problem is maybe they were classroom teachers 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 12, 15 years ago. And, these new conversations that we're having about literacy didn't really impact them as much when they were teachers. So they're going to have to make a stretch, and they're going to have to step out of their wheelhouse and what they're comfortable in. And they're going to have to start doing some background knowledge, research of their own about what it means, what disciplinary literacy truly means if you're going to embrace it as a campus. Because the reality is there isn't one content area or discipline being taught today that does not require kids to engage with text. Okay, we learn by engaging with text, and that doesn't mean a textbook necessarily. No. It could be reading a lab report, it could be analyzing graphs, it could be looking at political cartoons. I mean, it could be videos that are being used. I mean, all sorts of things. Those are all texts. And if you're using those things in your discipline, in your classroom, science, history, culinary arts, music, whatever it is, then you are teaching literacy as it surrounds that discipline. So we have to be able to teach our kids that the skill sets that are typically, traditionally assigned to the English teacher, those skills are applied to media of all sorts, not just the red badge of courage or the raven. Okay. The analysis of text is universal, and everybody needs to get on board about that. So our kids today, we've got video news reports, we've got social media. I mean, you have to be able to critically analyze Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, Snapchat, Instagram, documentary, radio, this podcast, for example. You and I are talking to each other. We both have perspectives. We both have background stories. The audience of this particular podcast is bringing with them their own experience. They're going to filter that through their own lens, all those kinds of things. And sophisticated users of literacy in the disciplines understand that, history isn't just about memorizing facts, and that science isn't just memorizing terms. Okay, history is a living, breathing thing. Science is an ongoing process. You have to have kids be able to understand the texts that surround those in order for them to participate in that in a sophisticated way, and not just sit there and wait to be told what to think or do. And I think that scares a lot of our content area teachers, because that's a huge responsibility to be able to get kids to engage with those kinds of conversations. You have to be able to create an environment in your classroom where kids feel safe having those kinds of conversations. And I think if we continue to provide support for our teachers in that kind of area, that we can build this more and more. And we have to provide our teachers examples of what that looks like. Because I know just a lot of them, I think, are just scared. But there's so much stuff out there right now. And I know one of the examples I've been talking about is that, the fact that we actually have a COVID-19 vaccine right now, and that it was able to be developed as relatively quickly as it was, is because we had sophisticated, literate scientists who were able to analyze information that had come from the past, look at data that they were getting in real time, and using their literacy to see when they were heading towards a dead end, and then come around and fix it from another way. Literacy played a huge role in something that is now impacting all of us on a daily basis. And the more we can get our teachers to embrace that concept of literacy and move away from this notion that literacy means being able to read literature, the better off we're all going to be.
Well, and I mean, I'm just thinking about the opportunities that are being missed in content areas specifically like history, and English too, actually, because we do have texts that we've read because we've always read them, or we've got historical textbooks that we've had since 1985 or whenever. And so it really is up to the teacher to kind of create this interpretation of history and what students should know and what they shouldn't know. And, I love Lin-Manuel Miranda's quote where he says, history is entirely created by the person who tells the story.
Absolutely.
And I feel like that totally fits here with like literacy, right? It's having that sophisticated lens to look at what you can teach, and who wrote it, where it was written, what time period was it written in. And it's an opportunity for students to be able to see, hey, literacy, reading, text, video, old photographs from history, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like lab science, like you talked about with COVID-19 and all those scientists, all these things are interconnected, and I need to be able to analyze and take away some of my bias, and figure out, is this real or is this not, and is it worth my time, investing in it.
Exactly.
Especially stuff off of social media. I think our kids are so ingrained in Snapchat and Instagram and TikTok, and there's a lot of stuff on there that is correct and maybe fact based, and there's a lot of stuff on there that's really emotion based, that may not be actual factual rational data. And because it's emotion based and because we're emotional creatures, I think they get sucked into that, especially because their brains aren't fully developed.
Right. And it's important to recognize too that now we have so many information streams that are available to us as consumers of information that weren't available, a decade ago or even 5 or 6 years ago. And so wrapping our brains around, the model, like you said, the model that is still happening in many of our classrooms is, for all intents and purposes, 100 years old. We haven't really changed it all that much. In fact, if you look at some of the reading lists that we have, you're like, oh, look, we haven't changed those at all. But getting people to wrap their head around the fact that text now means so many different things in a internet society, and that information is now shared in the blink of an eye rather than being filtered through several sources before it might be presented to somebody else. When you think of, the various, historical events such, World War II or the Vietnam War, or even, more recent, like the first, Gulf War, when the first President Bush was there, in order for us as consumers of information to read that had to go through several channels before it was finally printed in some sort of a paper or it was presented in some sort of a news program. Now you have people who are automatically giving info in the moment. And so our teaching and thinking about literacy hasn't caught up with the type of information that kids engage with. And I think that's hard for a lot, not just teachers, but it's hard for districts to wrap their head around. It's a big issue. It's not going to be something that is going to be solved instantly. I mean, this could take us another 10 years just to have this, shift. But being aware of that as a classroom teacher and being able to make that evident to your kids and be able to pull that out and talk to them about it as part of your relationship building so they know why things are relevant is a really important part.
Gosh, yes. I mean, the fact that somebody can just tweet something right away, and we as educators don't think of that as literacy or something to be analyzed. You know what I mean? Is a crying shame. I mean, because that's 2021. That's the world we live in, and that's the world the kids are living in. And as a classroom teacher, I don't even think I thought of that. I mean, I was a classroom teacher 3 years ago, and I wasn't necessarily, I mean, I was pulling in like documentaries and as much media as I could, but it's still a shift because you want to fall back on the lists and the trainings that you had. I mean, even my educational program was really trained based on just reading the books and giving a study guide. Like,
Yep.
there was no analysis and research of credibility of the author or the source or any of that kind of thing. And who knows? We don't even have time to do that now because things come out so quickly. So,
Yeah.
gosh, you said that. That just really hit home. Okay, so we talked a little bit about teachers being afraid of what they just don't know. I mean, I think there's a lot of teachers that are like, yes, I know, I would like to do this, or I am doing this to the best of my knowledge. I know
Right.
I could maybe do it better, but I am trying. So I kind of wanted to throw out like a simple strategy that they could take. No matter what content area they're in. And then obviously it's got an ELA background to it, but they could take it and then help their students kind of be able to break it down. So there's a strategy called the 3 read protocol, and it's helped many younger math students actually be able to use literacy skills in order to solve challenging word problems. So can you explain the strategy to our readers and kind of just break down how it works, the components of it, and then hopefully as you're discussing this, teachers that are listening that are in different content areas other than ELA can be like, oh, I could see that, like, and kind of brainstorm a little bit of how they could use that as a tool in their toolbox.
Okay. First of all, I would like to say that I love the 3 read protocol, and it's a really great way to provide sort of a support and a scaffold for kids as they're moving towards using these skill sets. So, um, as we just said, things are hitting us so fast and there's information coming at us from all that time. That doesn't mean that in the classroom, you can't stop and slow down
Yep.
with a piece of text and let kids wrap their head around it. Now, using sophisticated literacy skills is really, really hard. And there are several different things that happen at once when you do it. And our job is to help kids practice using those skill sets so they can use sort of the executive function of their brain and apply those skill sets simultaneously. But you know what? A lot of 11, 12, 13, 14, 18-year-olds have a hard time with that. So the 3 read protocol, what it does is you have a piece of text or a part of a text. It doesn't even have to be the whole text. It could be, an opening, it could be a paragraph, it could be a closing, depending on what it is you want to focus on. And you focus the reading around one thing first, and then you let the kids talk about it. And they take notes, they do whatever, they can do all sorts of stuff with that. And then you come back and you can do the same thing again, but now you're looking for something else. And then they add that to the information that they did in the first read. And then you do the third read. But the beauty of it is that you can control what it is they're looking for. And you can use it with any kind of text. And so, yeah, typically in an English classroom, you might do something like this with characterization and tone. Let me fall back on something that's familiar for English teachers. And so you read, a couple of paragraphs, and they're focusing in on characterization. And then as part of that, they focus in on dialogue. And then as they come back again, and they focus in on the tone used by the vocabulary. That would be a great example. But from a rhetorical point of view, you could look at it from the first read, after having maybe a short conversation about the author and what their background is. The first read could be, do you see anything in this first paragraph that gives any clues to what the author thinks? And then the second read could be, what kinds of evidence are they providing and where did they get it from? And then the third read could be, who do you think this audience is? Why do you think that? How do you think they received it? So, I mean, you can do so much with it, like in the English classroom, but you could also do that in science. You could do it in history. You could do it in photography. You could do it again, in music, and, you could do it as with art, and art analysis and reviews of art. You could do all sorts of things with it. But what the best part is that, like I said, this skill set with the 3 reads protocol, if we're going to use something like this as a scaffold to build those sophisticated skills that are necessary, and we give them practice doing that, we also have to clue kids in that what they're doing when they do the 3 reads protocol is they're taking those 3 maybe skill sets and they're wrapping them together to become a stronger reader. A lot of times we forget to clue kids in that we're helping them become better readers. And the kids walk away thinking that the goal was to complete the 3-read protocol.
Activity, and not
the goal isn't to complete the 3-read protocol and turn it in and get a grade. Right. The goal is to read a text through 3 different lenses so you can become a more sophisticated reader. How do we approach that in our classroom so the kids know the reason why and can turn around and explain it to somebody else? And that's the point that I really want to make with any kind of strategy that you use in the classroom. The strategy isn't the point. The strategy is the support. Right. The kids still have to understand what the point is.
Well, and I think you can do this. I mean, I could just hear in my head some younger teachers say, well, my kids can't do that. They're too young. They're too little. And no, they can. They can. You could do first read. Let's look at the picture of the cover. What do we think this is about? Yep. Okay. Second read. Let's look at the first, whatever it is, three words in the sentence. Okay. What do those words make you feel? I mean, you can just adapt it, to whatever. In science, maybe the first read, because it's a lot of nonfiction texts. Mm-hmm. Those are hard. I mean, yeah, to look at. I think those are harder than a story, obviously. I mean, you could do like, what are the vocab words that you notice? Mm-hmm. Your first read is just comprehension. Like, do you even know what this is saying? Let's talk about that. Then the second read could be like vocabulary words that stuck out to you that you just did not know. Yeah. Right. And then the third read is, okay, after we've defined those vocabulary words and you know what it's saying, what's really the purpose or what's it telling us that's going to make an impact on what we're learning today or what we're going to be doing this unit. So you can use it in any content area. But I love that you said that the goal, though, is to make sure the kids do not see it as just another activity. Oh, my gosh, the clarity that we don't give kids is baffling to me. Mm-hmm.
And it ties into that. When I hear teachers say to me, well, my kids can't do this, I'm like, well, your kids have figured you out, and they are passively sitting there in their seat, and they know if they sit there long enough, you'll help them. And you will, because you know what? All of us want our kids to be successful. Yes. And so when I walk into classrooms and I see a lot of over scaffolding going on, and what I usually see is the teacher doing all the work. And teachers are busting their butt, working so hard. And the kids are just sitting there smiling, and they're usually very compliant, and they're, happy, and they're very nice. But the kids aren't necessarily working. The kids are watching this teacher do these amazing things, but I want to see the kids doing the work. Getting kids to do work that's where the art of teaching comes in, right? And that's when people say, well, anybody can be a teacher. We know that's not true. No, it is not. The teaching part, the art of teaching, is where you take kids who are maybe worried about their skill sets and they aren't engaged and they're scared and, a lot of other things. And you provide them with support where they start seeing that they are able to do the work and that they have the space and the safety to learn how to use these skill sets without a threat of grades or, they have the safety to grow. And so using a 3 reads protocol as some sort of like a formative assessment where you can get an idea where your kids are and maybe make adjustments to your instruction from there is great. But we got to sort of move away from, the kids won't do it unless I attach a grade to it. You got to find a way to get kids to engage with it, even if there isn't a grade attached to it. How else can we do that? And those are the real conversations I think we need to be having.
Yeah, especially because, when we went to emergency learning in March, And a lot of kids were just so unengaged. I think it was just because they were like, well, what's going to be my grade? What's tied to the grade?
Yes.
I'm not
We've
doing it.
trained kids to think that way. We have
We
no one to
have,
blame
and
but
it's our
ourselves.
fault.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I would tell my kids, I think my last 2 years of teaching, I finally hit the point where I was like, look, everything's not going to be graded. I need to just look and see where your weaknesses are. Where are we not getting what we're getting? And I would just, pull things up and read them really quick and give them that immediate feedback. And then they would change it. And then they would turn it in. And then they would be like, well, I didn't see that in the grade book. And I said, no, that was just to help you get to the next level. That was to help you level up. You don't want that grade in the grade book. Like, let's level up a little bit before I start grading things
Right.
here, because if I graded
let's
that,
put this learning here. Let's look at our learning progression. Like, okay, we know that this is a sophisticated literacy skill set. Okay, they're built right into our standards. And we want our kids to recognize that they're making progress towards that. So we have to include them in that process somehow. And that's, I mean, obviously everybody would like the magic answer to that, but it's going to look different in every classroom anyway, depending on what it is you're doing. But I look forward to continuing those kinds of conversations with teachers and working out what that could look like and sharing different ideas. Because we have a lot of teachers, in our own district where we work that are doing amazing things that I would like to be, brought to light, to share with one another. But this is a big shift for a lot of people.
Yeah, you don't need to grade everything. Stop it.
Yeah.
Just
Stop
make
it.
it stop. Okay. So I like at the end though, you said that it can change. Like, so they get really good at the 3 read protocol, and then on certain levels of text, and then all of a sudden you can like flip it and give them more complex text.
Yes.
And they're like, whoa, because all of a sudden they're like, but then you can say, hey, fall back onto your 3 read protocol. We're going to change them a little bit, but you got this because you know how to do this. So don't be scared. You've got your safety net, right?
And being able to let kids practice on text that they haven't seen before in an environment where they're not going to be graded on it, because too often that doesn't happen until they take some sort of a district benchmark or some sort of a state test. We work with the same text over and over, and then suddenly they're given a text they're not familiar with and they panic. We have to let them approach hard things in the safety of our room too that they haven't seen. And the biggest thing I hear is like, well, we don't have time for that. Well, you absolutely do have time for that because you're teaching the skills that are in the standards. You can take time to do that. It might mean that you don't get to cover 2 of your favorite poems, but sorry, you're still teaching what needs to be taught.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because they're going to be able to then do it on their own.
Yes.
Even outside of the walls of your classroom.
Independent, sophisticated, literate students is our goal.
Oh, I love that. Say that again.
Independent, sophisticated, literate students. That's our goal.
That's that's our goal. And students in every form of themselves, right? Through every content. I'd always would tell my kids, like, and I should have used those words because those are much better. But I would always say, like, I just want you to be a mature learner. Like, I want you to find your maturity and realize that school should be about learning. I could care less about what your grade is. I will grade you because it's the system I'm in, but I want to see you grow as a learner. So here's a progression of grades. And at first, it may seem like I'm really easy, but by fourth quarter, you better have this stuff down. Because I wanted them to see that learning and writing and reading and analyzing was of complex things, a process. It's a process that you need to practice. And I was there for them. They had a safety net. And then I started to slowly pull that net away. And I think they appreciated that clarity and that honesty. But I mean, I didn't do that until way later in my career. I mean, I think the first 2 years I taught, I was like, okay, let's read To Kill a Mockingbird, and everybody answers study guide questions for chapter 1. And that's not what these kids in 2021. I don't think that's what kids in 2008 needed either, but definitely not in 2021.
One of the things that I wish, because I came across this after I'd left the classroom, and it's always sort of bothered me, but I did get to use it a little bit when I was teaching writing. I did a semester of teaching writing at ASU, but is the use of a mentor text where you have a variety of, essays or writings that were written for different reasons that are just out there. And then they talk about, why do nobody assigned this person, this wasn't an assignment. Somebody got up and wrote this for, because they felt like this needed to be out in the world. Why? Let's look at how this person did this. Like one of these articles that just came out after, there was the big, Harry and Meghan interview. And this kid wrote an article that showed up in the Irish Times. Okay, so this is an Irishman writing with a perception about this turmoil in the British royal family. So obviously there's a lot of background there. And, if anybody ever wants the link to it, I'm sure I can find it on Twitter. But the opening lead, the use of vocabulary, the analogies that this guy used, I mean, it was just, so spot on, brilliant. And it was tight and it was funny and it was a little bit snarky. But that's the kind of stuff, when I see writing like that as an English teacher, nonfiction, just real world writing, and I want to pull that in and say, look, this is why people write. Okay. It isn't just because, his editor called him and said, if you want an A by the end of the week, you better come up with something. And the more we can use text in front of kids, like real world text, I think the better off we're going to be. Like it's a craft, right? Writing's a craft, and not just like to write poems or write fiction. Writing, excellent historical analysis is a craft. I mean, walk into any bookstore and look at the section of history, of nonfiction, and look at how many hundreds of texts are there. And some of them are better reads than others because writing is the craft. And you can't become a great writer unless you're a sophisticated reader. And moving those all together just makes a lot of sense to me.
Well, and I think doing that will help kids, like, it's a low stakes writing assignment, right? But I always, but it's going to strengthen your memory. So, I can't listen to a presentation unless I'm taking notes on it, even though the presenter a million bazillion times will probably look at me and be like, you're going to get the notes at the end. I even say this as a teacher presenter, you'll get the notes at the end. But for me, if I don't write, I won't be able to retrieve it later.
Yeah.
Like I won't be able to have that retrieval of ideas. But for some people, they don't need that, right? But also I feel like in any subject, if they're not having low stakes writing, whether that's like a travel journal in 5th grade or, just wondering questions about like, how could we ever survive on Mars, or things just like getting them to be more innovative and creative and just using their imaginations too. Have them create their own scientific magazine.
Right.
Those types of things really support their learning and it locks it in. It gives it something to stick to other than flashcards. Now, yes. I'm not saying there isn't a place for memorization, but like there is, we've kind of leaned too far, I think, on kill and drill and we need to come back a little bit more to imaginative and creativity and writing and writing to learn, not just writing as a learning as a just learning to write, but using writing to actually learn.
And so one of the things that I like, one of the strategies that I really like that has kids do that, because it can, again, you can have them take it in a different way, is that notion of sort of like a one-pager.
Oh, I love one-pagers.
I love one-pagers are awesome. And you can use one-pagers for all sorts of things. They can be wildly creative or they could be completely sort of information driven, depending on what it is you want to. But it sort of blends that idea of sketch notes in with like, or you could even do like a sketch note thing that then turns into a more organized or structured one-pager. But having kids do that kind of, like you said, that low stakes writing that doesn't have to be, informal paragraph style is crucial. I'm the same way. I like to be able to put a pen to paper and sort of work out my thoughts. And I like to see how things relate to one another through drawing connections. Like I like drawing webs and connections and those kinds of things. And so, but I did a thing of a one pager. I just didn't know if I called it that back then. But now I think there are some people out there, there's lots of examples of people who are using that really well. And because it also ties into that notion of getting kids to be able to summarize what they've read, quickly and efficiently. And you could tie even in sort of a more formal written summary, like something like a rhetorical précis, which my English teachers will probably be familiar with. But say you take a précis and you turn that into a one pager that has more graphics on it. Or kids start with a one pager that's more graphic and they move to a more sophisticated written rhetorical précis, but they're still putting words on the page and ideas and building up to that. And I think it's crucial. And the handwriting, pen to paper, you're right. It makes a big connection for kids and learning.
It does. And I think in our age now, I mean, a team of researchers, I mean, in 2020, because this is I don't know why this is such a hot topic, but do we get rid of cursive? Oh my gosh, and all these things, right? They studied the importance of teaching handwriting as a learning strategy. So they studied seventh graders while they hand wrote, but they also drew and then they also typed words. And then, so the researchers concluded that handwriting and drawing produced neural tracings in their brain, which was indicative of deeper learning. I mean, the students' brains were just more stimulated when they were writing over when they were typing. And unfortunately, with COVID and going so digital, it's been hard for teachers because a lot of kids either can't type at all because they're little and they haven't learned to type, or they can't type well because they've never maybe been in a typing class or learned the correct placement of their fingers on the keys. And then they haven't really had the time to hand write. And I mean, I would still venture to say that even in hybrid spaces, even in digital spaces, have your kids do some writing and drawing and those physical acts, and then have them just take a picture of it and throw it up on a Flipgrid or I don't know, something, because it's still really important in digital lessons. I think, you mentioned sketch notes and one pagers and all of those things that they could still be done at home as well as in class and just presented digitally.
Sure. And I think a lot of teachers now, as we've moved through this year, a lot of people have got more comfortable doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And kids have become more attuned to it, especially, well, it's hard to say because I work primarily with secondary kids, right? So junior high through high school. So, they can come up with just about anything. But I think even our upper elementary and our little kids, they still understand. They can still draw the picture and hold it up, in front of the computer.
Oh yeah.
And do all those kinds of things. But you're right, they get to create something rather than just typing it into the computer. And you're right. I don't think we can discount how powerful that is. I know when we were talking about, the handwriting, when we revised the Arizona State standards and the foundational standards, and they really made that handwriting piece a central part of that. And people are like, well, why? Everybody types. And it was exactly for the reasons you said, is because there is lots of research out there that says when kids learn how to do that, especially even with cursive, when they start making those neural connections with the letters and it goes from their brain to their hand to the page and they learn to write, it also can impact their reading skill. So, I mean, it's super important that we're doing that, not only with our little ones, but see, my kid missed the cursive thing, right? So now I have a 16-year-old whose cursive is, I mean, he's tried to sort of teach himself, but it's not good. And when he gets a letter from, my mother-in-law, bless her heart, who writes him this beautiful letter in cursive, he struggles with it still. And, there's a gap of kids that sort of missed out on that.
Yeah, and my daughter, she's in second grade and they haven't started cursive yet, and she wants to so badly. She tries all the time to pretend to write in cursive, and there's something about learning how to do that is fascinating to kids because it's like almost like a different language.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they want to do that. They're stimulated by it because it's creative, it's different, it's, it's new. I just learned how to write. I'm just learning how to read.
Mm-hmm.
And there's all these artifacts that I can't read because they're in a different language, and it's
Yeah.
not a different language, it's just cursive. But to them, it's really hard to understand. And it's not that typing doesn't have a place. I mean, I couldn't get through my job if I didn't know how to type and type quickly.
Right.
But I think when we're talking about deeper learning and having things stick, I think definitely writing is huge. And I think a lot of teachers, I love when teachers have kids do interactive notebooks where they maybe have their lab and it's all printed out and it's glued or whatever, and then they do their lab summary, and that's great. But then on the other left hand side is the reflection. It's the writing component, and they can draw, they can do a web, and they can, or do a quick paragraph or whatever the teacher's having them do. But I always see teachers always doing, the pasting and all the other interactive notebook components. But sometimes teachers forget that other component of, hey, there's the left-hand side of each page should be a reflection on whatever the right side is. And that's such a missed opportunity to get those literacy skills we've been talking about, or relevance. Maybe they show a media clip that had something to do with what they just studied, or maybe a podcast episode, and they could reflect on that in their writing. And that would make it definitely more relevant. Yeah. Okay. Well, this was awesome. Great conversation. Thank you so much for coming on. I have one last thing I'm going to have you do. I've got 5 rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Here we go. Education is?
Never ending.
Oh, I love that. What inspires you?
Coffee. No.
Oh my God. Like, we should just write ode to coffee.
Okay, no. I think what inspires me are people who have the ability to keep moving forward in the face of adversity and try new things.
I love that. That absolutely, for sure. I mean, and gosh, only knows we've been doing that for a whole
Yes,
year.
especially this year. It's been inspiring for sure.
And I hope people continue that. I mean, there's been a lot of loss, but a lot of learning. And I think if we could keep that momentum going, and keep the positivity going, that would be great. Okay, number 3, if you could pass any wisdom onto your students, I know you teach teachers now, but think back. I mean, you have a 16-year-old. What would you share?
The ability to not take yourself too seriously and to be able to laugh at yourself is really, really important. And you'll get a lot farther than you think when you can recognize that, oh, I really screwed that up, rather than trying to be the show all the time. Um, I, One of the reasons I think I was successful in the classroom is because I was the first one to step up and say, oh, I really screwed that up. Sorry. This was a horrible lesson. I apologize. And my kids really responded to that. But that's really what I want, my son to know. Like, it's okay to make mistakes. And people will have a lot more respect for you if you own up to them sooner than later, and then try and go back and be better. But if you can't laugh at yourself, then your life is going to be really sad and boring, because usually you're the one who's the funniest.
It's true. Yep, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I laugh at myself all the time, and I try not to take myself too seriously at all.
Exactly.
I mean, it's somebody asked me the other day, in a podcast, I actually was the guest, which was horrifyingly scary. So I so appreciate now all my guests. It's so easier to be the host. But she said, what does it take to be an expert teacher? And I thought, you're asking me this? Like,
Yeah. I'll let you know when I get there, babe.
I'll let you know when I arrive, because I don't think anybody ever is going to be an expert teacher.
Nope.
You have to constantly be learning,
Right.
And that there's just, maybe when I am gone from this world, I will have enough wisdom to consider myself an expert.
An expert at something, right?
But there's a good amount of times where I'm like, I have no idea what's happening. So I gotta just
That happened to me like last week in the office. So, I'm sure it'll happen to me next week when I go back to work. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing.
It takes me a few minutes just sitting in my office. Like, okay, this is my office. And I do stuff here. There's things that happen. Okay. All right. Yep, there it is. I got to make that. Like, it just, it's life working for sure. Okay. Number 4. This is supposed to be rapid fire. Here we go. Number 4. What are your must-have smartphone apps?
Twitter. Sad,
absolutely,
but true.
Not sad. Twitter is like, okay.
I love it.
Don't say sad, because Twitter is like, first of all, where all the teachers are at.
There's at education, Twitter is really crazy. Like my bookmark section on Twitter is crazy because I've got so many great ideas that have come from Twitter. But I also my Twitter used to be primarily education, and now it also turned into my own personal, opinion on things that are happening. But I also use it for education. But I do I get a lot of great ideas, and I read a lot of really cool stuff about education on Twitter, which is great. But my other app that I can't live without is my banking app. Thank God for online banking. I love that. And then my Dutch Brothers app.
Okay. So you're a Dutch Bros girl? Is that what
I am a Dutch Bros girl, yeah.
So I'm a Starbucks girl. Okay. So I've got my Starbucks app. So what's your Dutch Bros drink?
It's either the hot, I like their Americano. It's good.
Okay.
It's a decent Americano. So I can drink it either hot or cold. So if it's hot, it's just a hot Americano with a splash of almond milk. And if it is an iced Americano, I usually get like half sweet, the sugar-free vanilla with almond milk, sugar-free vanilla syrup and almond milk. And if I'm going all out, I get the blended Rebel energy drink, the blend. So it's like a slushy in Rocky Point, which is, I think it's lime and strawberry and I think it's watermelon.
Oh, that just sounds good. Okay,
and so it's like a slushy. It's so good.
Here's the thing with Dutch Bros. I drive by it in like one day, but all the lines just look so long.
They're pretty good. They have the kids come out, with a iPad, and they move those lines pretty fast. You'd be shocked at how quick you'll get through that line.
Okay, my mom loves Dutch Bros because she always had one by her office, and she was like, I love that they're bringing them out to the East Valley because she works in Tempe. But Starbucks was always everywhere, right? So I just that taste, but I might have to try it now. Okay, and then last rapid fire question: what song do you know all the lyrics to?
Rapper's Delight, Sugar Hill Gang. Hip hop, hippie to the hippity hip hip hop. You don't stop and rocking to the bang bang boogie. Set up, jump the boogie to the rhythm of the boogity beat, and that's all you get.
I love it. Oh my gosh, Jenna, this was so fun. Thank you so much for coming on today.
You're welcome, friend.
You are amazing, and I am so glad I get to work with you.
I am so glad I get to work with you too. This is really cool.
And I hope you enjoy the rest of your spring break, even though I know you don't have big plans. I think that's the best thing ever. Rest and recharge. And you did your big thing. You did this, and that's
I did this, and now I'm ready to go back and bust out the rest of the year. So
yep. Well, no, but before that, get Dutch Brothers and then binge something on Netflix and rest.
You got it, my friend. All right. Take care of your family.
All right. Bye.
Thanks for listening. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Learning Unlocked and finding out more about why literacy is so crucial for our students. If you listened today as a GPS educator, you can receive PD recertification credit by visiting our Employee Hub page and navigating to professional growth and then digital PD courses. Just a reminder that we are on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at GPS Prof Growth. That's at GPS PROF GROWTH. For more information or resources from this episode, including Jenna's email, because I totally forgot to ask her at the end because she had me laughing at her rap song, please visit our website at learningunlocked.libsyn.com/website. We are distributed by Libsyn to Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Audible, and Amazon Music. Episodes are also available on our PGD YouTube channel under playlists. Our intro and outro music are licensed from Melody Loops. Thanks again, key holders. Keep unlocking curiosity, creativity, and innovation within your students. Stay kind and courageous, and I'll see you next time.